I want to say just a couple of things about some impacts which the natural scientists have talked about. There are others, so I'm not covering everything. This isn't comprehensive. Okay. So this is looking at glaciers in the mountains in South and Central Asia. If you look at the ones affecting India, this panel west, central and east Himalaya. And what you can see is that what they're predicting is a lot of glacier mass loss, right? And there is a big difference between different scenarios. So the red ones are RCP 8.5, and the blue dotted line is RCP 2 point something. That's the most favorable one with the least warming. And you can see there is a big difference. But you see, even with the most favorable scenario, you're going to have quite a lot of glacier mass loss, at least as estimated by the cryology, the people who study glaciers. Next. And this paper looks at the effect of glacier and snowpack loss on agriculture. And what these maps show you is the yield of different crops here: wheat top left, rice top right, cotton, and sugarcane. And this is the portion of the yield that they attribute to water from glacier and snowmelt. So there's the other major source of water is, of course, rainfall and groundwater irrigation. Okay, so those are the other two sources. And what you can see is basically, so these, in case you can't recognize what these maps are, you can see the Indian coastline towards the bottom. Basically, the polygon on the left is the Indus Basin. Polygon in the center is the Ganges Basin. The polygon on the right is the Brahmaputra Basin. Right. So basically, there's more rainfall, monsoon rainfall in the east, and there's less and less as you go west. So as you see in the Indus Basin, which is on the western side, it's much more dependent on glacier and snowmelt, all of these crops. And then it's basically the Brahmaputra Basin, they're not dependent on any of these crops. They're not dependent on glacier and snowmelt. And the Ganges Basin is somewhere in between, where glacier and snowmelt is quite significant for sugarcane in Uttar Pradesh. Okay, and to a lesser extent in some of these, in Punjab and Haryana, some of the other crops, wheat, rice as well. And the significance of this is because, well, we are going to lose a lot. We have already lost a lot of glacier mass, and we're also losing snowpack. Okay, next. So the other one that is kind of important and quite grim is sea level rise. So these are projections. So this map, the red areas show land projected to be below tide line in 2030. And as you can see, there are huge areas in eastern India and Bangladesh, which are likely to have saline intrusion very, very soon. Right? Some of these areas are already affected, but the area affected is predicted to expand a lot. I don't know, this is not my field, so I don't know how reliable these projections are, but this is what's out there in the published literature. Next one. This map, the red areas expand a lot. If you look at areas which are going to be flooded by seawater once a year, projected to be flooded once a year, it's really huge. And just the next one. That zeroes in on Kolkata, which is the capital of West Bengal. It's a large population, and you can see the areas all around the city are, projected to be flooded on average once a year, very soon. Right. So I think these are sort of predictions which when I saw them, I thought, well, why isn't there more concern about this? But I don't know. I don't know how reliable it is, but that's what's out there in the published literature, as I said. Next. Okay, so adaptation is going to be full of holes. I think that's the main thing I want to say. We should do as much of it as we can, but it is going to be full of holes because, there are so many different impacts. They're so heterogeneous. They affect people in so many different ways that it's very hard, even with, very good coordination and planning, to be able to deal with all of it. So I think the first order thing is that growth is essential. People are very vulnerable because they're poor. We saw that in the informal sector workers. If they were less poor, they would be much less vulnerable. And so that's simple. Next one, we need spatially disaggregated forecasts because of the heterogeneity. Next. And we need an understanding of the mechanisms of the impacts because that's really crucial for figuring out what's an appropriate adaptation and policy and what isn't. So that's all I have to say about adaptation. On mitigation, it's the political reality is that it's seen as expensive and it's not a political priority because there's lots of things on the agenda, right? And basically, growth and so on is obviously the first priority. And the general feeling is, why should one of the poorest countries in the world finance the global public good? So in this context, it's best to look for existing distortions as removal can improve mitigation. And there are plenty of those, right? Next. So one of them is electricity system reform. It's an obvious place to look. One of the things that I found in a paper a few years ago is that domestic pollution externalities are actually large compared to climate externalities. If you account for them, then there's a lot of incentive for the government of India from a purely Indian, narrowly selfish Indian perspective to do a lot of mitigation. But of course, it's easy to say that, but then addressing domestic externalities is not easy. But nevertheless, that's an area a lot of people are working on, and it's important.